So now we're going to look at a very powerful tool in SQL, a very powerful command. It is the case statement, and the case statement allows us to make intelligent decisions about our results. The case statement basically follows, and this is not the exact syntax, this is just the form it follows. It basically says if some condition that we give to it, if something equals something else, or if something exists, then return some value or expression, otherwise do something else. So it's kind of like the if function in Excel. So let's just get stuck into it and do some examples. So the case statement actually has two syntaxes. We'll examine the first and more common one. It follows this form: case, the word when, and then some sort of a data condition. The same sort of condition that you enter when you're constructing a where clause, something that evaluates to true or false. Quite often that involves a numerical or logical operator such as equals, greater than equals, something like that. Then the word then, and the result that we want when this condition is true. This result can be of any data type you wish. The statement is then followed with else and a different result that we want when this condition is not true. And it ends with the word end. So let's get stuck into using the first syntax of case statement in good old production.product. I'll start a new query window. Okay, now there is a column here, make flag, and if we look that up in the data dictionary for AdventureWorks, that is a bit. Now, a bit is basically, it's effectively a numeric data type. It's 1 or 0. So the description of the field tells us that 0 represents that a product is purchased, and 1 is that it's manufactured in-house. That's what these values mean. So let's say we want a report that makes use of this make flag value, but instead of that numeric 0 or 1, we really want a text description that makes sense of that value and actually tells us whether it is purchased or produced in-house. A piece of text that we can drop on, say, a Crystal report, and that makes plain English sense. So we'll produce that using the case statement and looking at that make flag value. I'll just select some of the columns that we need to actually make our report. Now we're going to create a text expression column on the far right here that actually returns purchased or manufactured depending on that value. So using that first syntax of case, this is how we would do it. Okay, so let's discuss this. We followed the syntax case when pp.makeflag is equals 0, because there's an equals there that evaluates to true or false, the sort of thing we would put in a where statement. This is the result we want if it is true, and if it's not, we just use that, and we finish it off with an end, and we give it a meaningful expression description. Now notice that I organized my syntax of my case statement on separate lines there. Personally, because that's my preference, I think that makes sense. You can format that as you see fit. Now, this case statement that we have here is fine and well and serves us well when there is only two choices involved, where there's only two choices in our decision tree, in this case where make flag is 1 or 0. What if there is more than two possible choices? How does case handle that? Well, let's just construct a query where we do have more than two possible choices and see how we can make case help us out. So we'll just wipe this out and then we'll save it as a different version of a file. So we'll go File, Save As, and we'll put that under, I've chosen to put it under Management Studio Case, and we'll put that under, we'll call that Product List Price is our new, I'll just make that caps, is our new file, and we will select all of the product. Now, if I go over to the right here, there is a column called list price. There's a lot of records there with 0 in them. So just for this exercise, let's just pick the ones that are non-zero. Now for brevity, let's just pick the bare minimum columns to demonstrate in this exercise. So let's select product ID, name, and our list price way over here. And you know what, we'll order it by list price, just to demonstrate the point that I'm going to make. Now if we browse our list prices here, they vary from $2 to $1,000 to well over $3,000. So let's say there's a requirement to create an expression column that categorizes these products based on their list price, but based on where they fall in a range of prices. And let's say there's 3 categories of list price that we're interested in. One is under $1,000, one is between $1,000 and $2,000, and one is over $2,000. So we categorize them as big, small, medium, and large, shall we say. So let's just start off with our case statement and see how far we go. So what does that get us? Well, all these guys here that are under $1,000, they are categorized as small. That's wonderful. The ones that are $1,000 or over, they're categorized as medium. Wonderful. But hang on, the requirement was that anything over $2,000 is supposed to be large. But this is flagged as medium. Why? Because we've only built 2 choices into our case statement. A case statement by itself is dichotomous. It only allows 1 branch or 2 options. So how do we cater for more than 2 options? Well, that's where nesting comes into it. And I'm going to show you how. I'll write the code and then we'll discuss it. So what have we got here? Well, if we scroll down and look at the results, and then we'll look at the code. So the ones that are under $1,000, they're small. The ones that are over $1,000 are medium. And if we go further down, and hey presto, our business requirement is fulfilled. If it's greater than or equal to 1,000, but less than 2,000, it's a medium. If it's over $2,000, however, then it's large. So that has met the requirement. Now, just to come up here, let's see what's happening. Okay, we start off with a case, and this is how the code runs. It goes, right, so when the list price is less than $1,000, I'm going to categorize that as small. Otherwise, and what we've done here is we have sort of, we've replaced the expression that we had there, medium. We've replaced it with another expression. And that expression isn't just a piece of literal text, it is a case statement in itself. So it's a case statement within a case statement. And we can nest even deeper because let's say there is another requirement where there's another category where if it's between 2,000 and 3,000, it's large. But if it's over 3,000, it's extra large or something like that. So we could nest again by putting dropping another case statement into this else branch. So let's give that a go. So as you can see, we've got another case statement dropped within a case statement. So the whole logic goes when it's less than 1,000, small. If it's not less than 1,000, then we come down there to this else branch. And the else branch begins with another case statement. So it goes when it's between 1,000 and 2,000, then that, otherwise, and then another one where it's between 2 and 3, then large. And if it's greater than 3, effectively, it's very large. So let's just look at the results down here. And I bet you will find, oh, look at that. If it's under 3,000, it's large. And if it's 3,000 or over, it has that very large value, which is what we wanted. Well, that's pretty powerful, but there is a slightly simpler syntax that we can construct our case statements that may suit better in some conditions. So let's have a look at that. So for this next exercise, let's just save that query file. And we'll just save it as, say, product list price. And we'll close that, and we'll start a fresh one. And we'll save this as address type, because we're going to query the address type table. So let's just select the entire address type table. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. This is some sort of an address type. Take it as read that that type is assigned to addresses proper in another table. But if we just look at the values, it's a column of an ID value and we've got a name. Let's say there's a business requirement that we must express in an expression column over here somewhere that indicates whether certain types of addresses receive a catalogue in the mail. Now let's say the business rule itself is actually a little bit convoluted because supposing this type gets a catalogue and this type does, but this type doesn't, this type does and doesn't, or basically it's so granular that it's going to be really hard to sort of express it in that nested style that we saw earlier, because you're going to have a lot of nesting and it could be quite hard to read. Well, there is a slightly simpler syntax that the case statement has, and we'll examine that in detail. So the case statement's second style of syntax works a little bit differently in that it doesn't compare true-false conditions, it compares literal values. So it's actually a little bit easier to understand maybe, but let's just look at it. So it begins with case and the column name that we are evaluating. The next part reads when a value, in other words, when the column name equals a certain value, then the result we want attached to that value. And then we can have another line when a different value, then a different result according to that. And we can have as many of these when lines as we like. Ultimately, we need an else clause that is the result for all other values other than those caught by the previous when lines, and ends in end. So I'm just going to write the case statement, and I'm going to select the prime key, the name, and I'm going to make up the case statement, and with the rules as to what values get what results, I'm pretty much just going to make it up as I go, but I'll just write it and then we'll discuss it. So what do we have here? Well, we've got a fairly complex bunch of logic here, but if the actual required logic is complex, then this style actually is fairly easy to understand. When name is this value, then do this. When it's something else, we do something else. And we could have had that nested style and said when PA name equals billing or equals home, and combine it with other conditions like or and. But you know what? This is actually a lot easier and simpler to read, so it's up to you, but it gets the job done. Now I've just closed that window and I'm going to start a new one, and I'm going to demonstrate a potential pitfall when we're dividing by numbers, and how the case statement can help us out with that. So I'm going to select I've just selected the entire purchase order detail table, and there's a couple of columns that I'm going to use for an operation here. There's line total and there's stocked quantity. Now let's say the requirement is that we want an expression that is the average line total over the quantities that we've got in stock. So that divided by that. Not quite sure why you would do that, but let's say for argument's sake that is the requirement. Now I'll just select the bare minimum columns to get this query readable. So the requirement is we're going to have line quantity divided by stocked quantity. Now that may produce a bit of a problem, because notice that some of these columns have a 0 in stocked quantity. Now for those of you that remember your school maths, something divided by 0 returns an error. Now, let's say for argument's sake that we could eliminate this just by putting in a where clause and saying don't return anything where stock quantity is 0. But let's say that, say to make a crystal report work, we actually do need to have everything returned, and just leaving some out is just not going to work for us. So we've got to work around this somehow. So let's just start writing the expression. Okay, let's execute it and see what happens. Oh dear, exactly what I was afraid of. Divide by zero error encountered. So it went down that table and started calculating things, came to a zero and encountered the zero. So how are we going to get around that? Well, hopefully the case statement can help us because it can have its conditional logic. It evaluates each row on its merits. So let's see if we can apply it and then we'll discuss it. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Well, you know what? I'll just put the expression name on its own line there. But basically, we've replaced the actual operation with a case statement. And the case says where the stock quantity does happen to be zero, you know what? Just put a zero there. You know, we could have put a null or something, but, you know, for our purposes, let's just put zero. That'll serve for the explanation. If it's not zero, if it's not zero, then just go ahead and do the divide by operation, and let's see what that gets us. Great, we don't get a divide by zero anymore. And if we scroll down there we go. We had a stock quantity of zero, but it didn't stop the operation, it just returned a zero. So case statement helped us out a great deal.